Welcome to today's lesson. And today we will be looking at fractions. As we shall see, it is not easy to use whole numbers to describe quantities, right? So, for example, let's look at this apple here. If I decide to eat half the apple, so yes, now I have two halves. If I decide to eat one, I'm left with one half. So we will say that I have divided it into two and I have eaten one. This is an example of what we call a fraction, okay? We use fractions to describe parts of quantities, okay? Now, let's move on to looking at different fractions. Right, we usually have one that could be 1/2, for example. And that is represented as that. Or we could have 3/5, 3/5, which is represented like so. Okay. And then let's look at two more. We have 4/10, which is represented as 4/10. And then let's look at another one, 3/4. 3/4, which is shown as 3/4. Okay? Now, if we look at how fractions are represented, we always have the same two things. And these two things are known as the numerator and the denominator. Okay, so the number at the top is known as the numerator, and this shows the number of parts in the fraction. Okay, this shows the number of parts in the fraction. Now, let's look at the second one, the denominator. Now, this is the name of the number below the line, right? This is the name of the number below the line, okay? And it shows the number of equal parts the whole has been divided into. So, for example, if we had a square, let's look at a square, okay? We have a square. If we look at a square, now if we were to divide this square into, for example, 4, yes, and shade in 1. So, the numerator here in this instance would be 1, because 1 represents the number of parts in the fraction. So the fraction is what we've taken out, okay? Right, and then the denominator is represented by the number of equal parts, so that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. So here the fraction represented would be a quarter, okay? Okay, so moving on, let's look at a few shapes. For example, let's look at a rectangle. If we had a rectangle, and then let's just cut it into 3, for example. So, for argument's sake, let's shade two out of those 3 boxes. So now, the fraction represented here would be 2 being the numerator because of these 2 over 3. Okay? 3 being the number of equal parts. So the total number of parts the shape has been divided into. Okay? Let's look at another one. Perhaps a circle this time. Okay? Excuse the circle, but it will be a freehand one. Okay, so let's just cut that up. Let's make it a bit more interesting. Let's add more pieces in there. Now, we have a circle, and this circle has been divided into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 equal parts. Now, let's say we shade 5. So let's take 5 parts out. So the first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, and the fifth one. Now, what fraction could this be? This fraction would be 5 being the numerator, seeing as we've shaded 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? And then the total number of parts, as we counted, was 8. So our fraction is 5 over 8. Okay? Now, let's look at one more. Let's look at one more example. Let's see. Let us divide this shape. Let's see. Let's go with another rectangle. Let's go with a rectangle again. And do this time. 1, yes. Okay. That's 4. Okay, we'll keep it with 4. And we are going to shade half this shape. So that's 1. Yes. Okay. So the fraction here we have 2 over 4. Now this will be covered later, but there's no harm in going through it. These two numbers can be reduced into what we call a lowest term. Now, if we were to divide both of these numbers by 2, that would give us 2 into 2, that's 1. 2 into 4, that's 2. So we have shaded half the shape. Okay? Brilliant. Okay. Now the next exercise we're going to look at is folding pieces of paper into equal parts. Okay, so here I've got a piece of paper and I'm going to fold it in half. I will fold it once. Okay. And fold it again. Okay. Okay, so if I was asked to shade half this shape, so half the shape, I would shade how many of these boxes? Right, the correct answer is 2. Okay, so just quickly, let's just do that. Okay, that's 1. So we've shaded half the shape and the fraction is represented as it is right there. Okay, let's look at another fraction. For example, perhaps let's look at 6. So just quickly, I'm going to fold this piece of paper here. That's 1 fold. Then a second one. And then a third one. A third fold. Okay. Now let's see. How many sections do we have here? The total is 8. Yes. Now let's shade one here, one here, one here, and one here. Let's shade another one for good measure. So now how many have I shaded? I've shaded 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that is 5/8. Okay, brilliant. Now let us look at the last section of this video, and we're going to be using some paper strips to represent our fractions. We're going to use these paper strips to represent our fractions. Okay, so I'm just going to write down a couple of fractions we want to represent. Let's say half. We've done half. A quarter. Let's have a quarter. Okay, and let's have 2/10, 2/10. And a last one, we will have 3/8. Okay? So let's look at the first one. The first one, what do we need for the numerator? So let's just have our line there. Okay? So the numerator here says 1. So let's have 1. Okay? And the denominator here is 2. Okay? So that's 1, 2. So the fraction represented here is 1/2, which is half. Okay? Now let's look at another one. The next one says that it is a quarter. Okay, and this time we will start with the denominator. The denominator says there is 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And we have one fraction from there. So it is 1 over 4. Okay? Okay. Now let's look at the next one. The next one is 2 over 10. The next one is 2 over 10. 2 over 10. And then the fourth one will be 3 over 8. Okay? So, let's start. 1, 2, maybe I should make a little more space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay? And then the numerator is 2. So 1, 2. Okay, so this fraction is 2 over 10. Okay, now let's look at the last one. The last one says 3 over 8. So we will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 represented, and then the numerator is represented by 3. So 1, 2, 3. So here the fraction we have is 3 over 8, or 3/8. Okay. So that is all for today's lesson, and thank you. I hope you understand. You have understood fractions, and I will see you next time.